This program is brought to you by the Bureau of Memetic Warfare.
Being ethnic, mixed race Filipino and unknown white, and supporting the alt-right can seem contradicting. How can someone be pro-white while being ethnic? Most people assume I am either confused or I just hate myself. Really, it just makes sense to be pro-white because with race comes culture, and the West is the best. I have an appreciation for what the founding European fathers sacrificed to give us. This land is amazing. This culture doesn't belong to me, and I have no business trying to change it, so why should I side with any other culture? I'll admit, like many in the alt-right do, that there are many East Asian cultures that have not only matched the greatness of the West, but these cultures are far more richer and more appreciated by those living there compared to what is seen in the West. However, I don't live in East Asia. I was born and raised in the US. I am very comfortable and cultured living here and have no desire to move. I mentioned earlier I am half Filipino. I'll go ahead and give insight as to how I feel about this. I don't feel inferior having a mother who came from a nation with a drastically lower average IQ compared to the US. In fact, many of the Filipinos who make up the higher end of the intelligence spectrum end up moving to westernized nations after completing college. It's fair to say when Filipinos migrate to the US, we're generally getting the best of their people, who often immediately assimilate into our culture. Most join the medical industry, becoming nurses and medical assistants. Some continue their education in the medical field. Some become skilled laborers. If there was a migrant class that represented what the ideal foreign-born citizen should be, I'd say it would be the Filipinos. Unfortunately for my mother, she didn't come here by choice. She makes up my Filipino half. Here's a story from what I was told by relatives. My grandmother's family was considered property to my grandfather's family and had to work on his property for a certain time span before they could be released. I'm not sure the specifics, but it has something to do with the Spaniards, as my grandmother comes from a native Filipino lineage and my grandfather came from a Spanish lineage. Anyways, during this time working on the property, my grandmother married my grandfather through a fixed marriage and had 12 children, my mother being one of the middle children. Living in a small jungle plantation community, my mother would have to tend different crops during the mornings and work with textile in a nearby town after school. After graduating high school, my grandfather ordered her to come to the US on visa to help raise one of his cousin's children who was recently born. As soon as my mother came to the US, she ran off from her host family and reunited with one of her uncles who gained his citizenship through the US Navy many years earlier. It was while she was staying with him she met my father, who was a youth leader at a local church in San Jose. Shortly after, she gained her full citizenship, married my father, and then I was born. With my mother being full Filipino, it's almost comforting to know I have some pure, nationalistic bloodlines somewhere in me, but unfortunately, it isn't enough for me to feel as if I can claim to be of Filipino descent. As far as my father's side of the family goes, it's quite a mess. My grandfather on my father's side of the family has no idea who his real father is. It's a toss-up between either a German, French, or Irish man, and his mother is of unknown nationality, but is rumored to be half Native American, of course. My grandfather never cared to find out. He spent most of his life as a drunk drifter, dragging my father and his brother back and forth through the Bible Belt, often knocking up random women and never sticking around long enough for his bastardized children to meet him. To this day, my home gets phone calls from his abandoned children asking where they can find their biological father. You can find him either wandering Redondo Beach or hiding out in downtown Los Angeles. He's made it very clear he wants to finish out his final days as a vagrant, living off Social Security. From what I know about my grandmother, she claims to be part Mexican and unknown European. She's been married 3 different times, my biological grandfather being her first husband, then marrying an Italian man and having a daughter with him, then settling down with an Irish gentleman who ended up becoming my primary grandfather figure. With all of this racial confusion from just one side of the family, it's hard to claim any nationalistic bloodlines or a solid ethnicity. I take an ancestry test to see what exactly I am, but I feel it really wouldn't matter at this point.